to go live on mine.
Okay, there we go. I just got to send the live to my friend real quick. She wanted me to send it to her. Then we'll be good.
Hey, Lori. Hey, Alma. Justice, Georgia.
Oops. How do I send it to him? I'll just copy the link. Okay. All right. Sorry for the delay. All right, Missy, can we start off with having you introduce yourself, give a brief background on the incident that occurred, and then we can start taking questions from there?
Yeah, sure. Well, my Missy Jenkins Smith. Back when it happened, I was just Missy Jenkins. The shooting happened on December the 1st, 1997. That day back then fell on a Monday after Thanksgiving break. And so I'm sure just most schools are usually off about 5 days during Thanksgiving break. And so that's how my school was. And so we'd been out of school for a while. Going back to school Monday was hard, of course, because for any kid, but I just remember being excited because me and my twin sister, we both were turning 16 on Christmas Eve. So that whole month, that's what I was focused on is starting to to get my permit and learn how to drive and get off the school bus and just be a teenager. But instead, that morning when me and my twin sister got to prayer circle, which was something that we did every day. It began right like 5 minutes before school began. Normally, the bell would ring, the 5 minute bell for the late bell would usually end up ringing right after we were done, and it was very simple. I mean, we would just get in a circle in the lobby of the school, which was kind of a busy area in the first place. There were a lot of kids, not just in this prayer circle there, but the office was right across the hall from the lobby. So there was a lot of kids in and out. It was the middle of the school. So if you had to get from one end to the other, you had to pass the lobby. And then a lot of car riders would get dropped off at the front door, which was where the lobby was. And there was a lot of students that would hang out outside of the prayer circle, just kind of hanging out with friends before they had to go to class. And so that morning, nothing was out of the ordinary. I remember walking around and talking to friends, and someone yelled, "Time to pray." And so we all got together. There would be a prayer leader or a prayer circle leader. And that day, it was a boy named Ben Strong. There was another boy who also was one of the leaders, but he didn't get home from Thanksgiving break yet, so he was late. And so this particular guy, like, he didn't always do it, but he was kind of like the backup. And so he took prayer requests from people. I don't remember any prayer requests that, or even if I said anything. But after that, we prayed and we said amen. And I had just enough time to walk. I was walking towards my backpack to grab that, stop at my locker, and then after that, I would go straight upstairs to my first class, which was World Civ. But once I got to the middle of the lobby, the first thing I saw was a girl I knew who was a freshman that year. I saw her get shot in the head and fall down to the ground. I didn't see the boy with the gun, but I saw her. And so I know that once you go into shock, you start trying to make sense of things. So that's the first thing I started doing when I saw her. I started trying to tell myself, this is a joke. This isn't real. I started looking around for firecrackers because the sound is that's what it sounded like, was firecrackers. I was not familiar with the gun whatsoever. The only guns I'd ever heard were guns on television, and this didn't sound like guns on TV. It sounded like firecrackers. So it all made sense to me that this was a joke. I just kind of froze and just stood there. And I remember hearing three slow pops when it first started. And then there was a spray of bullets, and I was hitting the spray. And being hit by a bullet was definitely nothing I would have described it to be. how I felt. Basically, I kind of felt it like I fainted in a way, like I was fainting. I didn't feel the bullet hit me, but my entire body went numb. I remember there was a ringing in my ears, and as I fell down to the ground, kind of felt like I floated. And once I landed on the ground, the impact of the floor didn't even hurt. Once I landed on the ground, immediately my twin sister crawled over and was hovering over me until he was done shooting. My twin sister knew a whole lot more that was going on than I knew. She saw the boy with the gun. She saw the girl that everyone saw that morning. Basically, if you were in the lobby, most people saw the girl that was a freshman get shot in the head. And then she also felt a bullet go through her hair and kind of rubbed the back of her neck. She didn't have any kind of injury, but later on, our older sister looked at the back of her neck and saw a red mark. So she was very lucky to not be injured. But after feeling that, she got down on the ground. She saw me. And that's when she crawled over and hovered over me while he was still shooting. She didn't know if I was hurt or not. And I didn't know what was happening. Again, I'm laying there confused. And I saw that my sister, once the gunshots had stopped, I saw that she was staring at something. And I knew that she knew what was happening. And because she was in shock, it took me many times to get her to answer me. But she finally told me that there was a gun. And then I was just like, a gun? Who's got a gun? And then she said, Michael. And there were plenty of Michaels I knew. There were, there were more than one Michael in our school. So I asked her, Michael who? And she said, Michael Carneal. And I couldn't believe she was telling me that this person did this because I knew him. He was a freshman that year. He was 14 years old. I just kind of gotten to know him that year through band. He was also in band with me as well. And I actually liked him. I even considered him a friend in a way. I liked being around him. So when she told me it was him, I was confused. I couldn't believe it. But that's when I also then realized that I had been shot. And so we both didn't know where I was shot. I had a black shirt on, so we couldn't see any blood. I think I was bleeding mostly internally as well. The very first thing I noticed was that I couldn't feel my stomach. I never noticed my legs in the beginning, but I know that probably was shock again. But when I told otherwise, just not feeling my stomach, I was okay. I didn't feel bad at that time. And so obviously we both were confused. We didn't know what that meant. But while we were trying to figure everything out, another good friend of ours, her name was Kelly. She was holding her left shoulder and she was crying because she'd been grazed by a bullet. She thought that someone had hit her, but it turned out that she'd been grazed on the left shoulder. She said that it hurt a lot. So I don't know if the difference between being shot, like, the bullet going straight through me and me not feeling it versus her being grazed. I don't know if that's why, you know, she felt pain. Who knows? I don't know. But I remember us having a conversation. I don't even know how long it lasted, but we finally it finally got to the point where my twin sister, she felt very lost. She didn't know what else to do. She was very overwhelmed. So that during that time there was no procedures whatsoever for something like this. We didn't even have a resource officer. So for the teachers to come up with what to do, I don't know how that happened, but I do know in the beginning they did lock all the students in the different classrooms in the beginning. And then someone made the decision to start moving all the students to the gymnasium that was detached outside of the high school. And so my twin sister looked at the end of the hallway and she saw students kind of filing from classrooms down that direction. And that day we rode to school with our best friend Taylor, who was a freshman, and her older sister was the one that could drive. So she saw Taylor at the end of the hallway, so she just went straight to her. And then her and Taylor went into the lobby of the gym. And in the lobby of the gym, and I always, whenever I speak to students, I always kind of make this something funny. Basically, there was an ancient artifact in there, and that ancient artifact was a payphone. It's something that you don't ever really see. So That was what my twin sister picked up to call my parents with. Cell phones did exist, so I'm not that old, but they weren't carried around like, students do today. Most people that had a cell phone, they probably were older, and I and my twin sister, didn't have one. Taylor didn't have one, but this payphone was the only way she was going to be able to get a hold of anyone outside of the school. And so luckily she was able to pick it up and not have to pay money, but she called my parents. And of course, when my mom answered the phone, she was not prepared to hear what she had to share with her, that had happened. But it was a good thing that my sister left me, because she was able to, call my parents and share with them exactly what happened, so that they didn't hear secondhand information that may have not been true. And then also kind of gave them some hope, because she was able to tell them that when she left me, that I was still speaking. And so they then had to kind of form a plan as to what to do, because there were 2 hospitals in Paducah. And so my aunt and uncle and grandmother went to one hospital, and my mom and my dad went to the other hospital. And and they basically sat there and waited for me until I got there. And my older sister, who lived at home at the time, she went to the school to find my twin sister. But she said that when she got to the school, she said it was just absolute, like, complete chaos outside the school, that there were just cars parked up and down the street, where parents had left, that they had the car doors were left open, cars were left on, where parents just ran out of their cars to go find their kids. And at one point, students, it started piling out of the gym. No one was really staying in there at that point, once parents started arriving. So my sister was trying to find my older sister, so she was making her way through the crowd, and she ended up running into a girl named Christina, who was in our grade, but was also the older sister of the girl that everyone saw get shot in the lobby. And that girl's name was Nicole. And so she looked at my twin sister and she said, "Mandy, I can't find Nicole anywhere. I've looked everywhere. I know you were down there with her. Do you know where she is?" And my twin sister knew exactly where Nicole was, but she also didn't want to have to be that person to tell her sister that her sister was gone. So the only thing that she could tell Christina was that she said, "Your sister was down there and she's been shot. Mine was shot too. You need to call your parents." So then after that, she ran right into our older sister, and they then went to one of the hospitals, like my parents and my grandparents and aunt, or my grandmother and aunt and uncle did. But while that was happening with them, I was still in the lobby, laying on the ground, confused and wondering what was going to happen to me. At one point, my algebra teacher that I had that year knelt down beside me and began to pray. And that's when I started questioning and kind of started to get scared and wondering if I was going to live or if I was going to die. And so I looked at my teacher and I said, "Am I going to die?" And she said, "No, you're going to be fine. You're going to be okay." And then I told her, "Well, I know I'm paralyzed because I can't feel my stomach." And at that point I started noticing my legs. I was like, I can't feel my legs. I don't know what to do at this point. Like I believe I'm paralyzed. And so she told me, "No, you're not paralyzed. You're just in shock. You're going to be fine." Well, I knew that she knew that I was paralyzed. And I know that I think she just didn't know how to tell a 16-year-old girl that, yes, this is what's happening to you. And she just wanted to keep me from going into shock any further than what I already was. So after a little while with my teacher, I did start to get very tired and I wanted to close my eyes. And she kept telling me, "Don't close your eyes, keep your eyes open." And it really did get to the point where I couldn't fight it anymore. And so I ended up closing my eyes, and I have no clue how long I was out. But the next thing I do remember is that looking over to my right and seeing a girl on the ground that I didn't notice before. I knew who she was. I pretty much knew everyone who had been shot because our school was so small. There was about 600 kids in the school. So if I didn't know someone, I at least know, if I didn't know someone personally, I at least knew their first name. But I recognized this girl. She was a senior. She was in band with me as well, and her name was Jessica. And I remember seeing Jessica being held by my chemistry teacher, who was trying to hold on to her, but he was having a hard time because she kept trying to roll all over the ground and moan. And I remember at that point, my algebra teacher that was with me previously, another teacher was with me at that point, but my algebra teacher, I remember hearing her say over and over and over again, she's not going to make it. She's not going to make it. And I basically sat there and watched that until the ambulances came to get us. There was nothing else to do but watch that. And once they got there, um, I found out later on that I was actually watching her die because she died in surgery 2 hours later. She bled to death. Once I was put into an ambulance. There was somebody they were giving CPR to next to me, and I didn't know who that person was at the time, but I found out later on who that person was. But once I got to the emergency room, they quickly gave me 2 IVs. One IV was giving me blood. I ended up with 2 pints of blood, and the other was giving me fluids. I had a chest tube that went to the left side of my into my lung, where I'd been shot in the lung. And at that point, they then also started to kind of perform like little tests on me, or what they could do, which was basically taking a needle and poking me and asking me if I could feel the pokes, and then asking me to move my feet. And of course, I couldn't feel the pokes and I couldn't move my feet. And so at that point, that's when they confirmed to me at that time I was paralyzed. But I also remember, it was just weird, being completely okay with it. And I thought I was crazy for being okay with this. I knew exactly what paralysis was. I knew that there wasn't a cure for it, that it was something that was not good. And so I knew that I looked crazy for not crying and looking like, and just saying okay when they told me. So I tried to make myself cry. But then I realized that I looked silly because I was a horrible actress trying to make myself cry. I wasn't crying at all. So I stopped. But once I got into the x-ray, when they started to kind of look at my injury some more to see kind of what had happened, I learned at that point how blessed I was to still be alive. I found out that the bullet entered my left shoulder. The bullet was a 22. I knew nothing about guns, like I said before, but now I know what a 22 does. When you're shot with a 22, it bounces around inside your body. So once it entered my left shoulder, it bounced around inside my body, missing every major artery and organ inside my body, besides hitting my left lung, and then hitting my spinal cord, and then exiting outside the right side of my back, and then into my shirt. I didn't even um the bullet didn't even go through my shirt. The bullet was actually found right in there, and it just fell out at that point. Let's see. And what else? But at that point, they also had told me something very interesting. One thing I did learn was that that the interesting thing was that I learned that the girl Jessica, who was shot the same place I was actually she was shot the same place I was, excuse me. But the thing was is that the bullet ended up hitting her aorta, and she bled to death. My situation, and I was very lucky that this happened. It's just a miracle. But the bullet went in between my esophagus and my aorta, which according to my doctor was a miracle, because they're so close together that if either of them were injured in any way, I would either have bled to death, or I would have died of some kind of toxic because of the esophagus and acid in your in your system. Both of those things would have been, a tragic death, but it went right in the middle, did not injure either, and then came out the right side of my back when, and I had mentioned that, the bullet came right out of my back and was found in my shirt. And so I didn't have to have surgery to have the bullet removed either. So I think at that point, once I realized how the path of the bullet was, and how I could have been just like Jessica, I could have been gone, that the fact that I couldn't walk was nothing compared to not getting that chance at life. Jessica was only 17 and she didn't get to live the life that I knew I was going to potentially, be able to live, even though it was going to be from a wheelchair and it was going to be different. After the x-ray, they then moved me into the ICU, and that's when I found out what happened. I found out that 3 girls were killed. The first one I mentioned was the girl who shot in the head that everyone saw. Her name was Nicole Hadley. She was 14 years old. The second person was Jessica James, the girl that was shot the same place I was, that I mentioned, died 2 hours later in surgery. And then the third person was the person that was in the ambulance with me that was receiving CPR. It turned out that that person was one of my friends. Her name was Casey Steger. She was 15. And I know that she knew exactly what was happening that morning because she was running out of the lobby and she almost got out of the way, but he shot her in the back of the head and it came out of her nose, and she landed face forward in the hallway, and she was almost out of the entire situation. There were 5 people injured, me being one of the most seriously injured. The path of the bullet I already shared, but I am paralyzed from the chest down. So it's a T4, T5 level. So the 4th and 5th thoracic vertebrae of my spinal cord is injured. I still have the use of my arms, thank goodness. So I'm blessed for that. There was my friend Kelly I mentioned before, who was grazed on the left shoulder. She was 16. There was a girl named Shelly who was actually shot in the neck. She was only 17 when this happened, but she was a senior that year. And I think that being shot in the neck, it kind of affected her hand, but thank goodness she started regaining the use of it. And then there were 2 boys that were shot. They were both 14. One of them, his name was Craig, and he was grazed on the neck. And then the second one, his name was Holland, and he was grazed on the head. So that's basically what happened that morning.
That is a lot of trauma.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot. Sometimes I ask myself, like, it almost feels like a movie. It doesn't feel like it even happened,
It's like you're watching it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. It's
I
almost,
can see that.
yeah.
By the way, one of the comments on TikTok is, thank you for being so brave to share your story. And she said your strength is admirable. And I agree with that.
Well, thank you so much.
So I have so many questions.
Yeah.
So what happened to Michael?
Yeah, that's what that was my question.
Well, that morning, he do you want to know like that, like after he was shooting, like what happened?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, basically after he started shooting, he eventually all of a sudden just kind of like, I guess, stopped. And I really think what happened was that he was in shock too. There's a little bit more to that. I think that I can share, but he eventually just stopped shooting. He had 1 bullet left in the gun, and he set the gun down on his own. And the prayer circle leader that morning was hiding behind a concrete pillar that was in the lobby, and he poked his head out, and he knew Michael, and he was just like, Michael, what are you doing? And then Michael was like, I don't know, I'm shooting people. And then the prayer circle leader said, why? Why? And so at that point, that's when Michael said he asked him to kill him. And of course the prayer circle leader was like, no, I'm not doing that. Well, we didn't have a resource officer. Like I said, there was not anybody but my principal that could be the person in charge to take care of this situation. So my principal, who was in the office and saw everything happen, he walked out. He walked over to Michael. He picked up the gun and he grabbed Michael by the arm and he said, "Come with me." And so the vice principal called the police, and I believe the guidance counselor and the principal put him in the guidance counselor's office, and that's where he was put until the police came and picked him up. He was interrogated, and then after I don't remember exactly everything that happened, but he eventually wanted to spare everybody from having some kind of trial. So he pled guilty but mentally ill. And his sentencing was just about a year after that. It was December the 16th of 98, where he was sentenced 25 years to life. So that meant that after 25 years, he had the chance of parole after 25 years, which that occurred in September of 2022. But before that, there was a lot of things that happened. After being in jail for a little while, I believe it was after about 10 or 11 years, he made the decision to try to change his plea to from the plea he gave, not guilty but mentally ill, or guilty but mentally ill. He wanted to change it to not guilty for reason of insanity. And so we went through, I would have to say, it was no less than 5, but it was no more than 10 different hearings where he tried to change his plea. And every time they the courts said no, that they weren't going to let him do that. And I think it was because of the amount of time that had been since it had happened. There was a lot of questions during that time. One of the hearings in Paducah, I remember I went to all of them except for one. And I remember his dad being on the stand and his sister being on the stand. And I remember one of the things that they questioned his father about was about Michael checking out books about psychology and things like that while he was in prison. And his dad was also a lawyer, so he kind of had a lot of help there. His dad didn't take him on as a client, but his dad knew who could help him. And he had an older sister, Michael did, who was a senior that year when it happened, but she went to school to become a psychologist, but she never got her license to practice. And so during that time also, he was and this is kind of I don't know if it's something that one of you guys have ever heard of, but it's something called murderabilia.
Oh yeah.
You've heard of that? Okay. Well, and those of you that haven't, it's websites where people own these websites and they sell things from serial killers, like Charles Manson's fingernail clippings or someone's hair. I mean, like really gross, messed up things. And so someone had well, at least there was a couple different sites that had him on their site. They were selling things like his prison number. One was a tracing of his hand, and then some letters that had been correspondence between him and some student that had attended Heath. I guess that was a friend of his. And so these things were being sold on the website. And according to there's the Son of Sam law that says that the serial killer can't profit from their crime, but there is someone profiting, and that is the person who owns the website. I definitely feel like there's some sort of gain that the serial killer is getting, as far as like something from given to them, like money for their commissary, things like that. That's what I think, but that was never said to be true. But there was a particular website that had his picture on there, and it was kind of very disturbing. It was almost like a question and answer session, almost like it was almost like a dating thing, like, so what is your favorite ice cream flavor, what do you see in a girl, and it was very disturbing to see that he was okay with being considered a serial killer. So I think that also is something that was put into play while he was trying to change his plea from guilty to mentally ill to not guilty for reason of insanity. Well, that ended up the very last chance he had. They said he couldn't. So at that point, he was just going to be waiting for the parole hearing, which was, and at that point, I guess 10 or 12 years at that point, and for that to happen. And so then September of 2022, the parole hearing happened. There was a day where the victims were able to give a victim impact statement. We wrote, the victims were told to write a victim impact statement, but we were also able to give one publicly or privately. My written impact statement was 27 pages long, and so I hoped that the probation officers that they read it every page. They said they did, but I did hope that they did, because it was 27 pages of how my life had changed and how it affected me in those 25 years. And so I chose to do it publicly because I'd always envisioned, whenever the parole hearing would come along, that the parole board would see me in a wheelchair and see that after 25 years, I was still dealing with the consequences of his actions. And I'd hoped also to represent all those people that you couldn't see the scars from. Like the 3 girls that died, the parole board, they didn't know those 3 girls. So the fact that they weren't there, that was nothing to them, because they wouldn't have noticed them being there, or if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
There was injuries. All the other injuries were scars that weren't as visual. Like my best friend Kelly, who was grazed on the left shoulder. There was a scar there, but it was covered up by her shirt. And then there was my best friend Taylor, who wasn't in the lobby that morning. There was a lot of mental health issues, like a lot of scars that people never saw. And there were a lot of people that were affected. And so I'd always hoped that I was going to represent that. And I'd always pictured it being in person. It ended up being on Zoom, which was fine, I guess, but I made sure that they knew that I wanted them to show my body entirely so they could see my wheelchair. And so, that was very nerve-wracking, even though I'm a public speaker and I share my story all the time. That was going to be the ultimate speaking engagement. So I did read from just a script that I wrote myself. And I hoped at that point that I said everything that I possibly could to get them to understand that, that I and others were still dealing with the consequences of his actions. And I felt that he should still be dealing with those consequences as well. No one else got a second chance. And then the second day was his parole hearing. And there was a lot of, and both hearings are actually on YouTube. You can look those up. And his parole hearing was very interesting. It was very confusing. And then after that was done, there was only 2 parole board members that heard the victims, that heard his parole hearing. And they decided that they couldn't make a decision, and that the entire parole board here would have to get together and discuss it. And I was confused as to what that meant, because there was a lot that was learned in his probation hearing that he had that was very concerning. One of the things was that he was still there were still new things on the Murderabilia site, and that bothered me, that he was still okay being considered a serial killer. Things like that was concerning. And he'd also mentioned that he was still hearing voices. That was one of the things that he was really focusing on when he was trying to change his plea. In the beginning, he was talking a lot about being bullied and that kind of thing, and then started focusing on mental health issues. And I have said all along that I didn't doubt that he had mental health issues, but I really think that maybe the bullying kind of pushed that out at a younger age. There was a history of mental illness in his mother's side. So, it made sense. But I also had concern that he even take care of himself after being taken care of for the many years that he's been in prison, and someone else is taking care of him and giving him his medicine. And I also knew that the world was not forgiving to him. And at the age of 14, whenever he felt like he couldn't handle how other students were dealing, he couldn't deal with it the right way. He couldn't ask for help. He just basically dealt with things on his own. And there were many things that he could have done to help himself, but he chose to bring a gun to school. And I think that that right there was another thing, was that he just that he could possibly make that decision again when the world got hard for him again. I couldn't see him finding a job very easy, him being a convicted murderer, and he would be living with his parents again, which at that point he was a 40-year-old man who was huge and his parents were older. I couldn't see them controlling him. They couldn't control this small child they had at 14. I couldn't see how that could change. So there were a lot of things I was concerned about, but I didn't understand why the whole parole board had to meet. But apparently the whole parole board had to meet in order for it to be something that, I guess, the final answer is what I understood. And so then that following Monday, because that the other hearings were on a Monday and Tuesday, and then that following next week, that Monday, all the parole members got together, and then they shared that he was not going to be given parole. And so he is now in prison for the rest of his life. So
That's probably a good thing.
yeah.
So this happened 2 years before Columbine.
Yes. It did.
And yet we don't hear about this one the way we do Columbine and some of the other ones.
Right. I think that Columbine a lot of people looked at it as a hostage situation, that things kind of like changed in that, I guess, in that aspect. But there's both boys killed themselves, so you're not going to find many shooters that are still alive. I'm in contact with a girl who was a victim from the Pearl, Mississippi shooting, which happened October the 1st of 97, just a month before the shooting that happened at my school. And she made the comment that, I think the guy that shot her, he's still alive, and that he wasn't going to be getting parole until he was around in his 50s or something like that. And so seeing what happened during our parole hearing with the shooter at our school, she said that it gave her hope that hopefully things did pan out the same way whenever that hearing happened to come along. But
if it did?
It hasn't yet. It has not yet. But the shooting that happened right after Heath, it was Arkansas. And it was two middle school boys. I don't remember the exact amount of people that were shot, but I do know that there was a teacher that was killed, and a lot of students were killed. The boys pulled a fire alarm, and then once everybody started coming outside, they started shooting everyone outside. And so both boys, according to the Arkansas law, they were able to get out of jail at the age of 18. And so both boys were let go. And one of them ended up reoffending and was put in jail. He had a gun offense. So another one was in jail again for that. And then the other boy, eventually, I learned, I think it was probably 3 years before our parole hearing with the shooter at my school, I had found out that he was in a car accident and was killed. But I talked to some people from that shooting, and they said that they could, that those both boys stayed in the same town, and they would go out to eat, and they would be there. I couldn't imagine that happening and still seeing those guys. I hope that the law has changed since then in Arkansas, and I think it has. But that to me is just I can't believe that. I guess it was because the age of the boys. I think the boys were 12 and 13, I believe. So it's scary.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how does I guess in terms of like healing for yourself and whatnot, where are you at when you hear about like say the school shooting that just happened this week?
It's kind of crazy. I used to be able to keep up with the shootings that happen, and now there's so many that's happened that I didn't even know there was one that happened this week. I
Oh
don't
wow.
watch news actually. I feel like that I can't. I don't feel like like it's. I don't feel like I'm hearing the truth sometimes. I don't know what's real and what's not, and so I don't like watching the news. But my my husband, he watches the news a lot. But I think that shootings are becoming so common that people are used to it, and that's scary to me because you saying that there was a shooting this week, I had no clue. And my
15-year-old girl.
really a
Yeah.
girl.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah, it was a girl and she was
that's not
she
very common.
no, it's not very
No.
common. And she was pictured wearing a shirt of like the same band shirt that Eric Harris was wearing too.
Huh.
Oh, you're kidding me. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, there's like a picture. I'll have to send it to you. It's weird.
Or did she kill herself? I mean, what happened?
No, she didn't.
Okay, so she's still alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, because that
And it was really kind of weird too because like you don't really hear many that aren't like normal public schools type settings.
yeah.
And this one did not seem to be that way. It seemed to be more kind of like a charter school type setup. It was also connected to a daycare that, had like younger like toddlers and stuff. And it was like, and there was a church campus and stuff there too. And
Wow.
it just made me think, because my son was homeschooled until fourth grade.
Yeah.
And when he finally went to school for the first time, we sent him to a charter school, just like it was on a church campus. And I was like, it was very small setting. And I thought, well, this has got to be like the safest setup. And then, I hear that, I'm like, oh gosh. But my son, whenever he switched over to going to public school this year, all summer long, he just kept talking about the fact that, am I going to be safe? And I was like, I want to be able to say yes. But, like back in the day, like our biggest threats were like tornadoes and like sitting outside in the hallway with books over our heads and stuff.
That's so true. What happened to that?
Yeah, I
Right.
totally know.
Right. I totally agree. But I've learned that it can happen anywhere now. And that's the scary thing. We've seen it happen in churches, it's been in movie theaters, it's been in malls, at colleges. It just doesn't stop at churches. It just doesn't stop at just the school system. So I've learned that you can't live in fear, but you definitely have to be aware, and look for those signs and not live your life like it's not going to happen to me. I know there's too many that were like, it happens other places. It's not going to happen here because we're good. That kind of attitude is where you're going to have problems. It's easier to ignore than it is to deal with the situation, but that is definitely what you cannot do. You can't ignore that. And it's different in different places. There's mental health issues in some places that are more of a situation than maybe it might be security in another place. Like at my school, I feel like it was security. If we had a resource officer, I don't think that he would have brought the gun to school. I think that he wouldn't have done that because there's a few different reasons why. But but then in Kentucky, there in Eastern Kentucky, there's more of a big drug issue. So there's a lot of mental health problems. And so I think that is where, they may need more mental health assistance there. But it just depends on how the setup is and what's going on. And no one can treat it like it's not going to happen here. And I always, when I talk to little kids for the longest time, I would just kind of like I had a hard time introducing it, and I would just kind of say, it was a boy brought a gun, and was not practicing good, gun safety, and ended up shooting some people and hurt them. Well, then when Sandy Hook happened, and that was right before my oldest son, was about to go into kindergarten. That's when I realized that it didn't matter what age you were. It
Oh,
young or old, it could happen to anybody. And so when I spoke to young kids, I then didn't, I obviously didn't go into detail, but I didn't hold back and didn't say that it didn't happen in a school.
right.
And about right after our 20-year anniversary, the 20-year anniversary of Heath was December 1st of 2017. The following January, the county next to the county that me and my family currently live in, and next to the county that the shooting happened in, there was a school, Marshall County, and there was a shooting there. And that was crazy to me because it was after the 20-year anniversary that happened at my school. And this school was literally like down the street. And this happened. And at that time, my oldest son, he was in fourth grade. And I remember seeing him become so scared. And there were so many concerns. I remember him telling me, he was worried because there was a certain door in the school that was unlocked, and he was worried that someone could come through that door, and then it needed to be locked. And then he was worried about the setup in the morning, whenever students arrive at school, that they pile them all in the cafeteria. And he said the fifth graders are closer to the door, where if someone came in, then they would die first. And I was surprised because they knew, both of my boys knew from a young age what happened to me, and even from a young age has listened to my story in detail. And I didn't realize how much of a story I was to them, but that really made it real for him, and it scared that scared, I was scared for him. But I was able to tell him, the concerns that you have, why don't you ask your principal or ask your teacher about those concerns? And then maybe it might be things that they didn't even think of, that they didn't know, needed to be taken care of. Or if it is being taken care of, they could at least give you a peace of mind as why or what's going on with it, that could keep, that there's not a situation where that could happen, that it could be prevented. So it was hard to see that, but it was also one of those things where whenever I would speak close to home, I would always tell people, whenever I would speak, that just because it happened at a school in our area doesn't mean that it can't happen again. But in the back of my mind, and I guess this is, just survival, but we're going to be okay. That always popped in my head. And then this happened. And it was hard to see it happen again in an area, in Western Kentucky, where it happened just 20 years previous. So it was weird.
So I have two more questions and I'll shut up.
No, you're fine. No.
So my first question is, how do you feel about, like, are you an advocate for parents now being held responsible for their children doing this?
I do think there's some responsibility with owning a gun. I don't like, I'm not a political person, and I don't think it's realistic to think that we can get rid of all guns, because, when I think of prohibition and the alcohol situation, there was underground, places where, alcohol was still being served, or where they could get a hold of things.
Right.
So I don't think that's something that's realistic. But I do think that what's realistic is to be responsible for having something like that. And so I don't think that I wouldn't have a problem with, people being accountable for not being responsible. We have a gun safe, and we keep guns in that. And an important thing I do want to mention, though, the guns that Michael used, or the gun that he used, came from his dad's closet. It was just in his dad's closet, so he went and got it. He knew where it was. and his dad never knew it was gone. But he also stole some guns from a friend, his best friend who lived down the street. He was very familiar with that family and was over their house a lot, and knew that there was a gun safe in their garage, and the gun safe was locked, and the bullets were separate, from the gun safe. But he knew way too much. He knew where the bullets were. He knew where the key was to get into the gun safe, and he also knew that there was a broken window in the garage that he could enter to get everything. And he did that during Thanksgiving break, and no one noticed. And even if someone noticed that they were gone, no one would have known who had taken them. And
Right.
so that kind of responsibility, I mean, there's ways to have prevented that. I mean, there's ways to have kept him from getting a hold of that. And I think that is important. If you're going to have something like that, you should be responsible for owning. And there's ways of, keeping it out of the hands of people that don't need to have them.
Yeah, no, listen, I'm all for it. That's one of the things that we talk about in my classes a lot, because, I teach like criminal law, tort law, all those things. And we talk a lot about those things. In fact, I would love to be able to invite you to talk to my students one day, if you're open to it.
Oh yeah, I would love to.
That would be absolutely amazing. And I teach on the college level, but I still feel like it's something that parents, need to even hear this message for their own kids and stuff. My second question though is, I read something about you earlier today. And I understand what your platform is, but the one thing about your platform that I really think needs to be discussed is, how can the community support survivors?
Okay, yeah. I believe that making sure that people know that they're not forgotten. I do know, I know that the small things because I know that some people get mad and say, thoughts and prayers, that is nothing or whatever. Well, when I was in the hospital, and I think it was after, because December the 1st was when it happened. The last victim that was shot left the hospital on December the 16th. And all I wanted to do was go home as well. But I knew that I couldn't. And I knew that I was going to be in the hospital for a long time. And I felt like everyone else was moving on with their life, and then I was still having to live through what happened. And I received at that point so many letters and packages from people all over the world that I definitely, at that point, I didn't feel alone. I think that we've kind of, those physical things, we've kind of lost touch, because texting and sending an email or whatever, but having those physical things to be able to have and to hold, and I still have a lot today, to know that there was a ton of people thinking of me, and that I really wasn't alone. I wasn't forgotten. And then I can still look at them today, and it comforts me still to know that there was actually so much good in the world, even though so much bad, kind of shines through. But I think that was something that was really important for me. There was just a lot of support for my situation too, because, with me being in a wheelchair, everyone made sure that if there was a need, that it was taken care of. And I'm very blessed for that. So I think just the simple letter or a gift to somebody that's gone through something like that makes them know that they're not alone, and that they're not forgotten, and that they know that they're still going through it, whether it be mental, physical, or whatever.
I actually love that, because
Me too.
I think that is something that is very much needed. There's an organization. I've been trying to get a hold of the lady who used to do it. And now I'm just kind of revamping, I guess, the idea in my head, but there was an organization that was called Make a Child Smile. And she used to help the parents get a PO box set up, and it was for people to send. She would feature 3 per month, and it was for children who were, chronically and terminally ill, for them to have people send cards and stuff to them, because, they like getting that mail. and
Right.
whatnot. But I like the idea of expanding that beyond just children, because you're right. I mean, that I listen, I hate going to the post, I mean, going down to my mailbox and it being full of junk.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Bills and junk.
Yes. Political ads, bills, flyers for this business that just opened. Like, I appreciate their,
Yeah,
what
well,
they're.
and today, like, I still send out Christmas cards and people send them back. I mean, it feels good to open up a Christmas card to see how, how that family's doing or whatever it may be. So, I mean, it's just the same thing. It's the same feeling, um, to keep that contact, to show that, you care and that that person's being thought of, because I know that there are things that we can do to help prevent school shootings, but even on the smallest scale of telling someone that they're in your thoughts and prayers. I mean, just taking the moment to do that does mean a lot, and it meant a lot to me. It really did. So,
For what it's worth, I think you need to be on TikTok. Just FYI.
oh,
Oh, I gotta get my puzzle piece.
I'm so like,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well,
People
no, I'm going to tell you
don't-
why. Because first of all, there's a huge community over there. But like one of the people on here just said, her story is something I'll never forget hearing. Thank you for this.
oh, that's awesome. I mean, and hearing things like that, it definitely helps me continue to live with what because I still have to live it every day. And it's not getting easier as I've gotten older. Things that have gotten harder. And I wrote a book called I Choose to Be Happy. And I wrote that back in 2008. And and it was revised like in 2014 and 2012 and 2014. I'm hoping to revise it again. But in the situation that I am now, my arms are not working like they worked before when it comes to pushing a wheelchair, or being able to, transfer, or some of the things I could do just completely independently are changing now. And so it's kind of getting hard to choose to be happy. So to hear that I'm making an impact in some way about sharing my story, it reminds me that there was a purpose for this, and that I'm hopefully helping others with, and that's what makes it easier to deal with every day. It definitely does. So thank you for sharing that with me and letting me know that, because it definitely mentally helps today.
I have a very amazing book publisher if you happen to need anybody.
Oh,
That's just an FYI. And Andrew, do you know Raven Rollins?
Yeah, I do.
She's got that book club now every month where they're doing like books that are related to like true crime and stuff like that Missy might be able to be hooked up with to get her book included in something like that as well.
yeah,
That's a
it
great
tells
idea.
what happened from the beginning to I guess until I guess after the parole hearing is not in it, so that's something that I'm wanting to add. That's the kind of the revision I feel like needs to be added to it. But yeah, that sounds awesome. I would love to have that be a part of it. I also wrote a second one. It's called Lessons from a School Shooting Survivor, and that came out in 2017. And both of those could actually be found on Amazon. But I would love to, revise the first one and make it a lot more current.
I have another thank you for sharing your story with a whole bunch of hearts for you on TikTok as well.
Thank you. Well, thanks for everybody for being my counselor, because, even though I shared my story and nothing changed, I'm still in a wheelchair, that kind of thing. It feels good to get it out and just to talk about it. And that's actually something I felt like Michael didn't have, the shooter. I think he didn't have someone he felt like that could listen, that he could talk to. And if he had that, I think that he would have made a different decision. But I think that he also didn't know that he had that. There were people there that were willing to help him. He just decided that there was no one but himself that could help his situation.
Are you still in touch with any of the other victims?
Well, my best friend Kelly, I'm still in touch with her all the time. It seems like when the anniversary comes around, I talk a lot to my friend Casey's mom. And then, Facebook is like a constant reunion. So there's always catching up on that. But as far as like, physically seeing somebody, it would be my friend Kelly. That we've been best friends since we were in third grade. So we've always continued, that contact.
I think this story needs to be out there. There needs to be a documentary about it. I think if nothing else, just your spirit is something to be, I'm in awe of it.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm blessed. I only know that, that God's what has helped me overcome this is what I feel like. I feel like to me that there's got to be, some higher power that's been in motion, because I was able to handle the fact that I was in a wheelchair, knowing that I was paralyzed, and then being able, also, I was the shyest person you could ever meet. And then all of a sudden I was speaking to thousands, and doing it, speaking for an hour and doing it, and have done it since I was a junior in high school. I've been blessed to be able to do a lot of things to help make an impact. So I know that I feel like there's something, I feel like God has given me something to work with, if that makes sense, a purpose in my life. And for that, I think that's what helps me get through it every day. There's a purpose, there's a reason. And then I can handle that.
Have you ever heard the term, God doesn't call the prepared, he prepares the called?
Yes, I have heard that. Yes.
That is you.
Yeah. I mean,
That is you.
Yeah, I'm lucky, very blessed.
Yeah. I am a 4-time cancer survivor, so
Wow.
I'm in touch with what you're feeling and saying.
Wow. That's
because
amazing.
I found my purpose through that bunch of bullshit. It's
Wow.
it's like it can make you or break you.
Right, exactly. And that's how I'm not gonna break me. That's always kind of thought, like, after the parole hearing happened, I think a lot of people were like celebrating, like, it's over, he's in jail, we can breathe. And then it was like the end of November, on the 28th of November, I fell out of my wheelchair and broke my left femur.
Oh,
So yeah. And so it was hard, because at that point I ended up having to have surgery on December the 1st after the parole hearing. And the weird thing was that I was going to be in the hospital again during Christmas, and I was so upset. And I had kids then at that point, my babies. I didn't want to be in the hospital while, it was the Christmas season. But they actually discharged me and let me out of the hospital on December the 16th, which was way back when I wanted to go home and I couldn't. And so I just kind of saw that, and that kind of opened my eyes, and for me to see that, yeah, I'm not going to let that break me either. And then just when I got over that, I fell out of my wheelchair again and broke my fibia and tibia on the same leg.
Oh,
and so, but I got through that. And then I ended up with a blood clot after that, like in stroke symptoms, but I got through that. And I feel like it's not going to, it tries to creep up and get me, but I'm not going to let it. Because I still have a lot of blessings in my life.
I always tell Jen, I'm always in awe of her too, because she's been through so much, and yet she's like the most resilient person that I know. But it's so funny. I'm a professor, and one of the deans at my school had sent me an email yesterday, and it was just a random email asking me if I had, some wording for my syllabus that she wanted to look at. And I wrote her back and I sent it to her, and she just wrote me back and she said, "Thank you for sharing." But she included a line. And this line was not like a signature line or anything else, but I think this very line sums up the two of you. And it says, "You do not serve the world by playing small. Be your whole self."
Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
100%. That's a good one. Send that to me.
Yeah.
Okay. I was like, just so random that she said that to me. And I was like, wow. I was like, she's really kind of tapping into how I'm feeling. I'm feeling like, am I playing small? I might be playing small.
You might be playing small. You might be playing small. That's a whole nother show.
You're not wrong. Well, thank you so much. Sorry, Andrew, it wasn't your show today.
Oh no, it's fine. That's fine.
Sorry, we hijacked it.
I just released a 2-part interview with her, so I'm glad you guys were able to get some questions in and whatnot.
Yeah, this was good, and congratulations on surviving.
Yeah,
I had another person who said, Missy, you're an inspiration. Another one said, God bless you. You're a blessing to many.
thank you so much. Thank you. And guys, thank you for having me, because, you know, it definitely has helped me today to be able to share my story. And I appreciate that the most. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we'd love to have you
thank you
back.
for coming on.
Yes, I would love to be back. And if anybody's interested in having me as a speaker, I've gone as far as Los Angeles. I've been nothing international yet, but that doesn't mean I can't. But
Right.
Speaking is something I love to do, and I want to still continue. And it's something that I feel like is my purpose and to be able to share. So if there's any interest in that, I have a website. It's missyjenkins.com. I think you're able to email through that. And so if there's, I speak to schools, conferences, and to churches. So, and it's something I love to do.
Okay. Well, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Yes,
Thanks, y'all.
thank you.
Thanks, Andrew, for setting us up.
Yeah,
Yes,
no problem.
Andrew.
No problem. Yeah, thank you,
Bye, y'all.
Missy. Happy holidays, okay?
Yes, you too. Thank you so much.
All right, take care, guys.